You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
Today we have an awesome guest, Shree Kulkarni, a dynamic real estate executive and serial entrepreneur who's making waves in both real estate development and technology. Shree is the CEO of Kulkarni Properties, where he owns and develops commercial properties across Florida and Ohio. But his expertise doesn't stop there. He's also the visionary behind Realty Dynamics, a cutting-edge real estate software company, and Serenity Capital Management, where he brings strategic investment insights to the table. The JD from The Ohio State University and a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Purdue, Shree brings a unique mix of legal engineering and business acumen to every project he touches. His ability to blend real estate, technology, and investment strategy makes him a true thought leader in the industry. Today, we're really excited to dive into his journey and the role of technology in real estate and where he sees the market heading next. Welcome, Shree.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Rachel. Really appreciate the opportunity. And by the way, it is the Ohio State University. I'm glad you said that.
I've been corrected. I have other friends that went to the Ohio State.
I'm glad we're
I believe
starting
there's a
off on the right
trademark or
foot.
something, right? Anyways, so I think we wanted to get started and just touch on kind of quickly what are some of the major projects you're working on today? What are some things that you're excited about?
Well, I'm excited about a lot of things. The major projects that we're working on are just a few subsets of that. So I just go through them very quickly. We've got a couple projects in Indianapolis, one in Pendleton, Indiana, which is a 75-acre mixed-use project.
Wow.
That we were at the finish line with a big box user. And I don't know if you guys have you guys ever done business with like the Walmarts and the Krogers and the whatever of the world?
Yep.
Yeah, they're not easy to do business with.
Not at all.
Yeah. and so I would say we were at the finish line, and then the deal sort of ended up dying. This was probably 3-4 weeks ago. So it's kind of been a bummer. Yeah, it sucks. And then we've got a big rezoning project in Avon, Indiana. We own 120 acres over there that we're trying to get into for housing. And like all municipalities, Avon, Indiana is a great town, beautiful town. A lot of amazing people live there, but they have a very particular view on housing, which kind of goes back to your pre-thing, Rachel, about Columbus and sort of understanding the need that they need more people to fuel this growth and to be the people to work at all these businesses that are coming into Columbus, but. So we're working with them, trying to get through the rezoning process and get this property that was classified as it's now ag and estate homes, which is 5 homes per acre. No, sorry, 5 acres per home into something more dense. 5 homes per acre. 5 acres per home is insane.
Yeah, interesting.
We've got a 35.5-acre project in Columbus, Ohio, in this small town called Canal Winchester that we're almost, hopefully, to contract with and I'm knocking on my desk, even though it's fake. Would with a large grocery store, and there'll be 244 multifamily units and a bunch of outlots. And then we've got a bunch of stuff here in Florida. Some John and I have talked about it. Some a townhome site that actually is under contract with a potential buyer. We've got a self-storage site down in Wimauma, Florida. So we're busy, and then the PropTech stuff. So we're super excited about all of it.
Yeah, Shree, it sounds like you're covering a lot, literally in square footage and in acres. But are there specific trends or asset classes that you're going to focus on, and what's leading you to push through development in Ohio and in Florida?
Yeah, great question. So, number one, we own property, so like you have to make use of what you got. I think that's the driving force for much of it. Columbus. So, like this, I always say this if anybody ever asks me, which people don't, and I don't blame them. Real estate development is really a function of two things, right? It's a function of people. You need more people moving to an area, and you need more money in a perfect world, right? Because you can have population growth but not income growth, and that doesn't mean that you're going to get higher rents or more demand. But typically, if you have income growth, you end up doing better as a real estate developer. So Columbus is one of those markets where they're getting both, right? They got great businesses moving into Columbus, and they have a really aggressive municipality over there that wants jobs. You know, you have this massive Intel plant, which, you know, at one point in time, it still may be, I don't know, but one of the largest infrastructure projects in the world, right?
Wow.
They're putting $20 billion to work in this area called New Albany with the ability to expand to $100 billion in terms of their chip manufacturing production.
Wow, that's great.
In addition to that, you got all these major corporations buying land for data centers. So there may be, I don't know, 20, 30, $50 billion of data centers being planned by, you know, private parties, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, all those people are buying. So, you know, Columbus is a great market and it's growing. Indianapolis is sort of a similar market. There's a lot of good vibes in Indianapolis. So, you know, that's where we typically want to focus on. Frankly, that's why I moved to Florida, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm attracted to what's happening here, and there's a lot of opportunity.
That's a great explanation and a nice walkthrough. There's a lot you're definitely working on. John, do you want to still talk about development or move to PropTech?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot to be discussed. So let's get into. I know you mentioned the other day that you've got a new software company that you're starting. I'm kind of curious, kind of what's that about, and could you give us a little overview of kind of what problem you're solving?
Yeah, great. So the new software company is called Roov.ai,
How do you
and
spell that?
effectively ROOV.ai. And we haven't officially, like, we have an Instagram page and all that stuff, but we're launching it very, very soon. So effectively, the concept is we're developing a piece of software that we have a beta for, which you're going to be able to, if you're a real estate agent, and the focus really is on residential real estate, but it could be for commercial as well, is you send us your pictures, and these are static JPEG images or whatever, and then we're going to create a video with a voiceover that you can end up posting online. And so it's not revolutionary or groundbreaking, but the part that is not revolutionary, but is movement forward is the software that enables you to just do this. You can put the images in. You end up categorizing the images, like one's a living room, of this, that, and the other, and then it pops out a video for you guys. Now the beauty is, they say anything that with a video, you end up getting 40% more views online than if you have static images. So you're a real estate agent. You're doing the work anyways, right? You need it for Zillow. You need it for posting on MLS. Now we're going to be able to provide you a video to help you sell your listing or lease it or do whatever.
Cool. So is that going to be an app or some type of online software, I assume?
Yeah, it'll start off as being an online software, and then, you know, as we end up growing, yeah, the hope is to produce an app. Our goal, though, on the PropTech side, like, is we have basically three. This is what I'm most excited about. We have Realty Dynamics, which is this awesome software that we continue to innovate and iterate.
Yep.
that helps people make great real estate decisions based on data.
Mm-hmm.
On this other side, we have Roov.ai, and then you and I have sort of talked about it. We have this company called PropStar, which we're going to be launching, I don't know, probably in the next 3-4 months. We're actually out there with a pitch deck raising funds. So if you guys know anybody, would love to talk to them. But effectively, this business is, we're going to basically help developers and people that are looking at real estate find vendors that have worked on those properties in the past by year. And so effectively, we're going to make a connection in the moment of need between somebody looking for a vendor and the vendor itself, because that space is wide open, right? So the way vendors typically market themselves is like, they'll get a booth at BizNow or buy a banner ad at, on the website or
Yeah.
right or
When you
whatever.
say vendor, so when you say vendor, are you talking about like an architect or an engineer? Are you talking about like an HVAC person who's going to fix your broken HVAC system? Like, are all the above?
All of the above, John. Like our focus is going to start on the commercial side, but
That's a fantastic idea, and there's so much demand for that. And you're right. It's like I was thinking about this the other day. We're buying some buildings here in Tampa, and we have some properties up in Boston, and like figuring out, especially when you're first starting your business, figuring out who to call that's a reliable plumber or HVAC engineer or whoever. All you do, it's the way it's been done for 2,000 years. You ask your friend, hey, who do you guys use? Right. And that's great. But sometimes those people have a lack of availability, et cetera, and having access to really vetted, really good professionals, especially from a commercial standpoint, is fantastic. So that's exciting. Look forward to seeing kind of how that works.
John, can I add to that? Like, I think that's important to note. Most of the vendors that you use have never worked on the property that you're looking at. So that's number one, right? Number two, so they may not have the subject matter expertise that you're looking for. Number two, the availability. And number three, to the vendors, they would never meet John or Rachel. Like in their like the connection points for them are very few and far between. If you're Absolutely. A surveyor, you hope somebody sees your survey.
Yeah.
Now somebody's going to be calling you saying, I saw you worked on this property.
Yeah.
What do you know about it? And then you get to be like, let's get together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a unique twist to it, because I've seen a lot of similar things, but I do like that, like you said, people work on it because, a new person comes from out of town, just like, we're all doing, and you like lose all of that knowledge. And how do you track the vendors, and how do you keep in track with them? And they're not going to have the resources necessarily to find you all the time, or the time to do that. So that's really an interesting twist for out of state, out of area investors.
Well, yeah, and if I know that Shree has, I don't know, just say Shree owns an industrial property in a certain part of Tampa, and I have an industrial property I just bought there, and I don't know, Shree's out of town, he's on vacation for 2 weeks, and my the plumbing breaks or whatever, and I go onto this app and look it up, and suddenly I know that they know that type of system, et cetera, and they're in the area and they're reliable, and that's great. That's like it's almost like an Angie's List for commercial real estate. It sounds like, but smarter, obviously, right?
Right. Well, and frankly, there's not a review system. It's just about expertise and experience.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is you're getting people who've worked on the property in the past.
100%. And like your example with the survey is great, because like I will go on you or an attorney, right? If I want an attorney that does land use in a particular area, what do? You go on the public records and you look it up, and you figure out who's done those types of projects before in that area, right? So very cool. That's exciting.
So you have 3 PropTech companies you're working on, is that correct?
We are, to the best of our ability, we're doing it. We're trying.
Can you talk to our audience a little bit about Realty Dynamics?
Sure. Yeah. Realty Dynamics. So in the world of real estate, I mean, I don't know if you guys ever read that old Sam Walton book? I forget what it's called, but it was like how he started.
I heard it's amazing. Walmart. I got to read it. I've been told many times. I definitely need to read that one, but tell us.
Totally. Yep. Well, the other one I've heard too. Have you guys read the one about with Stephen Schwartzman?
When yes. He was starting amazing book. Love it. Yeah.
Have you? I want to read that one.
I've got it on my desk. I'll lend it to you.
All right. Good enough. Would love that.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's what I want to. I want to read it. Anyway, so this book that Sam Walton wrote talks about his journey from starting Walmart to, at the time, I mean, my goodness, I must have read it when I was 20, maybe.
Nice.
I don't know. Maybe they were at $100 billion in revenue, and they're at $650 billion in revenue today. So you can just imagine. He was talking about when they would go to these small towns, they effectively would fly a plane over the town and see like, oh, is there a block or some parcel in the middle of the town that made sense? And he would land the plane, go talk to whoever he needed to, and maybe, if I remember correctly, do a deal in that moment and then build a, it was a 5-10 cent store or whatever the name was back in the day as he expanded his business. So like, times have changed. There's almost, it's not infinite, but there's a tremendous amount of data. And Florida happens to be a very data rich state. So effectively, Realty Dynamics takes all of this publicly available data and aggregates it into one place. And if you can imagine this as a pyramid, the foundation of the pyramid is this publicly available data. So we have it, we update it constantly, and we have the best in class system. And then on top of that, we built this really nice pyramid. So we have other functions, we have layers that you wouldn't find in other places. So that's value add for us. We've got an analytics layer, or a bunch of layers in analytics that basically do the things that you would need, John, or you would need, Rachel, which is like, let's say you're looking at land or areas to develop. We go through and mine all this data. And so we'll look at like income growth. We'll look at population growth. We'll look at how many water fountains are in the area or how much green space is in the area. And we'll help you define, if you didn't know, areas that we think are ripe for residential growth or residential communities. So that's another layer. Then on top of that layer, we've got this beautiful AI chatbot called Land Buddy, which lets you talk to it. And we basically trained it in all the land use codes and future land use codes for most of the large counties and cities in Florida. Mm-hmm. So instead of like calling your attorney, which for me happens constantly, right? You have a question, excuse me. You have a question. Your first question is, how do I answer this? You call your attorney. He or she costs $650 an hour. You get a bill in a month. You're like, holy crap, that was an expensive.
Over and over again.
Yeah. So here you could get 80% there. It's not an attorney, like you need an attorney, but you get the sense. So, some of the use cases people look up, like their impact fees. They look up, you can get estimates on cost of impact fees. They look at heights. They look at zoning, like uses. They look at setbacks, blah, 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 you name it. And so that's sort of how we're thinking about this. And eventually, when you get to this top, it's going to be where all of this data for us ends up getting aggregated. And then you're going to be able to talk to some AI platform, and it's going to be able to answer your questions extraordinarily tactically, like an assassin. Like, you're going to be able to say, hey, listen, I want to know where people are moving, where traffic counts are over 35,000 cars a day, and you're within a mile of a 10-acre park. And it's going to be able to immediately take you to those sites, highlight them. We just launched the skip tracing feature. So once you get the information, you can click on the skip tracing tool and it'll spit out to you the ownership information. So you can make the calls and get in touch with the potential owners.
So what was the motivation behind building this? Because obviously it's clearly very useful. I mean, you and I have talked about the product before. It sounds like a fantastic product, and I think it's any developer would immediately get the value proposition. But I'm curious, kind of what was the motivation for you to build this? Was it for just out of your own kind of, hey, building something to solve your own problems, or was there something else that kind of got you excited about it?
Yeah, I think number one, there are competitors. We're not the only people in the world who do something like this. We just didn't feel like the competitors met our expectations. So that's step one, right? Step two, even if they were good, they were expensive. So we knew we could offer a better product for cheaper. And I think if you're thinking of the clay for a business, that seems pretty good soft ground, right? Like, can I deliver something? Now, as it turns out, John and Rachel, as you guys know, man, starting a business is really hard, and it takes twice as much time and twice as much money. And it has been a very interesting, but very fun and rewarding, time period. So that was number one. And so that's two. And then number three is we needed it, right? So why not build something that we know that we use? So we use it constantly, and we've tied up multiple deals on this platform that ostensibly or hopefully will make us some money.
Shree, on this podcast, we love to talk to developers or people in the real estate industry who have then, created or worked on PropTech because, you're solving a real problem. You know what people need on the ground. It's not someone coming from outside. So we love to hear that. And as you said, like building a business is hard. And so just wondering, going from being a developer, which is already hard enough, to then starting a prop tech company, what were some things that you were surprised about? And what were some of the lessons you learned, growing a prop tech company?
Yeah. Well, all right. The biggest lesson for me, okay, is other than the money, like it's amazing how many people will take your money. Like they'll just take it, and then you wonder where did it go? And then you look back, and you look back and say, oh, I had this much money, now I have this much money. What happened to it? I feel like that happens to me
Where's the
all the
value
time.
that it was created?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take that separately.
Sure.
Once we finally got a product that works and we feel like delivers value, it's been interesting to me to hear the other side of that argument, because it's so clear in my mind. Like I look at this and I'm like, why wouldn't you? Like, of course you should subscribe to Realty Dynamics.
Sure.
Right. And people that I respect and really smart people say, you know what, it's not for us for this reason, this reason. I find that fascinating because I look at it like it's really all about. You mentioned value. That's all I'm focused on is, hey, let's say that our subscription for one person costs $199 a month. So let's say you're spending $2,400 on software. The biggest thing that I tell people is, listen, if you get one deal, let's call it, and let's say you have a 3-year window. So you take this is a 3-year expense for you, $7,200. You get one deal, or probably more likely you avoid a bad deal, like you save due diligence expense. This is nothing. Like it's like in the world of real estate, it's nothing. Like you spend $2,400 sneezing. I mean, it's wild. But still, getting people, for me, it's just been interesting. I'm not saying they're wrong or I'm right. I'm just, that's been a huge challenge.
And I think that's an interesting, I think to your point and to Rachel's question, I think what Rachel is attempting to do is basically invert typically PropTech has been tech bros trying to start companies for real estate people. And what you are is a real estate person creating a tech company. And I worked in financial technology for a little while. And a big part of what you're describing is very much like the workflow. How do you break into the workflow of an existing group that's operating successful that can use your product? And how do you demonstrate that value, or how do you communicate the value, but also kind of help them adjust their workflow or the work process? And people that have had success with one work process are always very hesitant to add something else to that process or adjust it, because they're already like, oh, well, I've already done it. So to me, that's like it's not an unusual sales challenge just in terms of selling technology, right? Would you say, Rachel, that's kind of...
Yeah, the change management piece is huge. And that's why a lot of, like John said, tech bros fail, because they don't understand the workflow. So at least you can say, here's how we do it now. Here's how I do it. Here's how it fits in. You don't have to do much of the education piece. You get it. But it is still interesting. And it is really good for people to hear that, it is still tough and it is changing minds. And yeah, it's exactly what John said, that change management is a little tough.
That's always been the biggest. We sold. I was selling technology on Wall Street to brokers, and it was all about like, why should I change my workflow, and what's the reasoning that we have to implement this software? Because nobody likes change, right? If they can avoid change, they will. They'll say no thanks. But once it's locked in, and it's a part of the workflow. Then you got a never-ending stream of revenue, which is obviously the point, right? But what else about technology? Like because I've developed technology before, and I'm just kind of curious, like managing developers, managing the technical end. Has that been kind of a challenge, kind of figuring that out, or getting the right people on the team? I'm just kind of curious. Have some of those pieces been something you've overcome, or has it all kind of come together from a team standpoint pretty smoothly?
No, I mean, it's not been smooth at all. I feel like I don't know that.
There's no such thing as smooth, I think, right? That's why I
Yeah,
asked the question.
yeah, that's exactly right. It's not been smooth at all. We do have, so the head of the technology side for me is this guy named Apratim Biswas. He's been with me from the beginning, and I love this guy. He's very bright, motivated, just articulate human being. So he's leading that charge. So I don't. My value is I'm very good conceptually. Like I understand the concepts really well, but understanding the technical piece he delivers.
Awesome.
And so we use a lot of different resources, man. We go to India, we've been to Ukraine, we've been I mean, you name it. We've been talking to people all over the world to help us create and deliver. We actually have some great people here in town. I think it was Source Toad who helped build Realty Dynamics up front. They built a great platform. So, like, you know,
Is that a local
yeah,
shop in Tampa?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So yeah, we'll use whatever we can. I think to try to get to the next level. But no, there's no, you know, this guys. There's no easy. This is hard. It's hard. But which is why you gotta love it, right? Like if you don't love it, it's not gonna be. It's never gonna be worth it.
Absolutely, I totally believe in that. Absolutely. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit because there's been some pretty significant changes over the last few days, actually, and in terms of the Trump administration's kind of policy changes with regard to tariffs. And we can speak, maybe we can speak specifically to tariffs, but just more generally about kind of what you see in 2025 and beyond in terms of the landscape for real estate and real estate development. I'm kind of curious, what do you see? I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of positive business sentiment around, you know, some of the, they call it animal spirits in terms of excitement about some amount of certainty in terms of the regulatory environment. But I'm curious kind of what you see as opportunities and maybe some challenges that might be ahead in the industry in the next few years.
You know, honestly, it's a phenomenal question. I've spent like the last week with my broker, like in increments on the phone, trying to understand all of this. I think I don't know that I have a clear view because I think it's so complicated. There's so many orders, like layers of the onion that you have to understand and peel back. And it's not just like taking this one big macro view. I don't think explains it for the different sectors of the world. So like what happens in real estate, I think is very different than what happens potentially. And I know there are equity plays, like public equity plays in the real estate sector. So, but you know, the way that they move, they don't always move in relation to how real estate moves, right? Because they're publicly traded stocks that have their own sort of things. What are my thoughts? Broadly speaking, I think that I think Trump's policies, I agree with 80% of them. And I think I just don't love how all of it ends up getting articulated all the time. What does it mean apolitically? I think that it produces volatility, and volatility, if you're an investor, can be good or bad. And like, if you're opportunistic, there's going to be ways to sort of capitalize on what's happening in the world today. So, but I'm honestly, like, I'm still trying to figure out, for example, let's just take the small thing about just tariffs. Okay. What does it mean about tariffs? The way I understand tariffs, I had to go through this sort of logical step process with my broker. Okay. So tariffs mean that things get more expensive, but that's only true if there aren't other options. So that's like step one, right? There's a tariff. If you could secure the good, if it's a 25% tariff, but you can get this product from another country for 10% more, it only costs the consumer 10% more. It's not 25% more. So that's like step one, right? Step two is with tariffs, these currencies that the values end up changing, right? The peso devalued, the Canadian dollar devalued. So then I guess I don't understand, or I'm not smart enough to understand. Like, does that mean that they're producing things for even cheaper now? And if there's a 25% tariff on our side of the coin, is it still this? Is it still the same? Like, does it cost them less to produce, and so they end up making the same margins because
Yeah.
now it's less expensive for them to make it? The third
Yeah,
piece of that is
if the dollar gets 25% stronger against the Canadian dollar and there's a 25% tariff, then does that mean that it kind of levels itself out, right? Because your basically purchasing power goes up, right? So
precisely.
there's a lot of dynamics like that, which is similarly, if a company has a, I don't know, let's say they have a 50% margin of what they're shipping into the United States, they could easily cut in that case, not saying it's good for their business, but they could cut the margin in half and suddenly the product doesn't cost any more to US consumers. So there's a lot of nuance, absolutely, in terms of the economy. But it's broadly, it's being presented as tariffs are going to create inflation, right? But there's a lot of deflationary stuff that's also in the kind of planning mode, which is deregulation, potentially lower taxes, et cetera. And I think the intent is to offset some of those costs and potentially expenses by some of those actions as well. But it's either way, it's disruptive, right? And it's an exciting time, and I think there's going to be, like you said, a lot of opportunities created, which will be interesting to see how they kind of roll out.
Yeah, but let's talk through this whole concept of like deregulating. Like I'm hopeful, right? For all intents, I mean, me personally, I think we underemphasize climate change. I think climate change needs to be a much bigger conversation, and I don't mean that like I just mean economically. It needs to be. It's just so important. There was like a University of Miami. They did this report where they were tracking how fast these buildings are sinking, and I think one of them was like the Porsche building, right? So there's a really nice, expensive buildings on the Miami coast, and they're sinking faster than they should be sinking because, there's two things, right? Water level rises, or as we take groundwater out, the ground sinks.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so like from that report, I didn't hear anything about it. So I don't know what it means. I don't know why we're not spending more time thinking about it. So I think, okay, so let's just say climate change. I think climate change we need to spend more time on and more thinking on. In general, I do think we need less regulation because I think it's easy to be overregulated. It's easy for people to find value in saying yes, no, or indifferent to decisions that we should all be on the same page on. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful. Shoot, yeah, but I haven't heard anything about it other than Doge. Maybe is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of conversation about it, but it's been expressed, right? Explicitly expressed that there will be deregulation, and I think Doge is just kind of the beginning of the process because if you think about it, there's less bureaucrats and regulators. There's going to be less regulation, right? But I mean, that's all just kind of speculation. But yeah, I think your point about deregulation and climate is an important one. I think because so much of development. A big part of it is the climate regulation that really environmental protection is what I'm talking about, right? And so whether it's a state agency or federal agency, and it can be as simple as like protecting there's an endangered fern right down the street, and that's blocking the development of a 500 units of housing. Like, is that something that really should take precedence over 500 units of housing for people who may have nowhere else to live? I think there's got to be some common sense, ability to have some common sense conversations about things, right? And that seems like that's always missing, unfortunately, because there's the loud voice, and this is always, real estate becomes political very quickly, right? So there's always the loudest voices are on the far left and the far right. That's what you hear, and then you don't the resolution is not really in the best interest of society, unfortunately, a lot of times. So, but I experienced it when we were developing housing in Massachusetts, and it was, there was a friend of mine who has a project that they got their full approvals to build 2.5 years ago, and somebody decided to file a lawsuit. Just because they were an attorney, they knew that they could file a lawsuit to block the construction from starting, block the project from starting. So it was some type of appeal process for the approval. But they basically filed a suit, and 2.5 years later, they still they've recently gotten their approval, but that was 60 units of housing in a town that needs housing, and everyone supported it in terms of the city and majority of the neighborhood, but it was just held up because the system allowed for that appeal, which it's just crazy. It's insane that these one individual can hold up the creation of housing for people who need it. In addition,
I couldn't agree more.
So, but.
Well, let me ask you guys a question about this, though. I couldn't agree more, John. I think it's insane that, to your point, one person can hold up effectively a community, right? Like,
Exactly.
It makes no sense. But I do, like, I don't know if you guys have been reading about Manatee County. So I wanted to get your guys' feedback on this. Manatee County, there's been a lot of flooding, right? After these past storms.
This is the county just south of Tampa, by the way, for people who aren't familiar with it.
And so one of the thoughts, right? All these problems happen because these systems are really complicated, right? Like the stormwater systems are naturally occurring. Like if you follow these tributaries, they're like
gravity. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And so these externalities of like approving one deal relative to the rest of the system become right in a vacuum. Every deal works, but when you put this deal on top of this deal next to this deal, for whatever reason, because we don't understand all of the physics or the concepts that well, they just end up not working. And so you end up getting flooding in places that you probably shouldn't have flooding. And so my question for you guys is, how do you deal, like on one hand, I agree with you 100%, right? Like we need housing. Development shouldn't stop because, you have one red woodpecker, on this one tree and 1,000 acres. On the inverse, I'm trying to understand how you deal with that piece of it.
Yeah. Can I jump in real quick? So on the east coast of Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, which I don't think had enough press, millions of sewage were dumped into our beautiful waterways. Like everyone says they're the Venice of something, but Florida, Fort Lauderdale's, it's yachting capital, like everything is waterfront, this beautiful water. And if you go kayaking, you're going to get, MRSA. And thankfully, most of it has been cleaned up. But a lot of it was caused from this infrastructure question. And it is also interesting. I worked on these large mixed use communities and developments in Boston, and then came down to work in Miami. Thankfully, I worked for a very sustainable, thought leader, looking to the future company. But I was just shocked at the difference. And yeah, like there's extremes everywhere, right? Like we all want to be centrist. But in Massachusetts or in Boston, a lot of it are, planned unit developments, and you have to understand what your neighbors are doing and planning, and you have to understand traffic and how your development is working with the development next door and the sewer system and the infrastructure. And I think a lot of that is lacking here. And it's not just, they're building too much, right? So then the public sentiment's going too far the other way, where they're just start to become anti-building, anti-housing, when it's like, no, we just need smarter development to make sure that these systems, can handle this, and that both neighbors, are not building these developments and not even thinking of how it's affecting the area. So I've definitely seen that, and it has some terrible consequences.
Well, yeah, and that's systems thinking, right? At the base of it is systems thinking. It's holistic thinking. It's not kind of one by one, and really the regulatory group that's in charge of stormwater is supposed to be looking at that and understanding the load on the system and whether or not it's maxed out. And if it is, then other maybe more on-site infiltration has to take place in terms of the groundwater, et cetera, like that. All that stuff should be managed by the local authority typically. But I'm saying all this with also full knowledge that it's not necessarily hasn't been managed very well, because I've seen the effects in Tampa, here in Tampa. I mean, you drive down one of the main streets in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Tampa, and you've got, the water's taken over half the roadway. And this is just because it rained heavily for 15, 20 minutes in the afternoon. Right. So there is a lack, unfortunately, of that type of thinking. But so I think there needs to be regulation. I don't necessarily think there doesn't need to be regulation, but there definitely has to be a reset is necessary, and a reassessment of the situation on some type of regular basis in terms of who's doing what and what their kind of value they're actually creating. Because that would happen at a company, right? If you had a bunch of employees that weren't creating any value for a company, they would either get moved to another department where they could create value, or they go somewhere else. This state government, the local government, it's oh, well, Johnny's been working, he's been sitting at that desk for 30 years, so we'll give him another 10 years. We're not going to let him go, and that doesn't, that accumulates over time, and then you end up with these massive overhead costs and people who are making something out of nothing, right? I mean, you can have, I'm sure you've dealt with this a million times. You have an engineer who thinks that the pipe should be 6 inches when it's only 4 inches or whatever, right? And you're talking to the person, and you're the one who's going to be using the water that's coming into the property, but for whatever reason, that engineer is insisting on some other pipe, and that upgrade is going to cost whatever, a meaningful percentage, and you spend like 2 months arguing over a pipe, right? So, and that person is maybe just flexing their muscles because that's the small amount of power and influence they have that day. And maybe they're not having a good month. Maybe they're having a challenging year. And unfortunately, that just creates this stagnation in real estate development, and it slows the process down. And then everyone says, "Oh, why don't we have more housing? Why aren't we getting more things built?"
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. Is like these municipalities you have to change and grow. If you're getting this, huge influx of people and capital and building and, commercial, like your local area, your local municipality has to grow with it. So the project I worked on at Brickell City Center, Brickell City Center in Brickell, when they first bought the land, Miami said, if you keep this land and you pay taxes, we'll give you the right to build 24/7. So you do not have, there's no, no days off, no noise violations, because it was parking lots. It was empty. It was, at the time. And thankfully that developer is, like I said, a sustainable developer, and it worked out. But if you keep that mentality after Brickell is already so overbuilt, like you have to change with the times. And so it's not necessarily that, these people are awful or not thinking about it. It's just, there is expansive growth, and your like municipalities have to grow with it. And maybe you need bigger departments, or you need to shift people over to more, maybe you have one guy in wastewater and now you need a whole team looking at it. So there's a lot of ways. What are you seeing, Shree, or what do you think?
Well, I think as a developer, what I see that ends up happening more often, I agree with a couple of things that I've heard. The latter developments, for whatever reason, take a disproportionate share of it's almost like a tax, right? Let's say that you have a decade where you're not managing infrastructure, right? You're not managing it. And then now you go in for a development, and then somehow a decade of infrastructure growth is on your shoulders.
Yeah.
There's too many cars on the road. There's just this and that. And it turns out to be a huge problem because you have to tell people it's not my job to cure all of housing, right? Like I had a deal up in Ohio where it felt like the community wanted me to solve the housing crisis. Right? I mean, hey, that's just not my job. My job as a developer, I want to make as much money as I can by doing what is allowed under the zoning code and try to be as neighborly as I can. But I'm not trying to solve every municipal problem by virtue of this project. But I think that's a big problem. But the other thing I think too that you mentioned, John, which is really important, is and you did too, Rachel, which is what I like about what's happening in the world today is the focus is on like efficiency, but efficiency not for the sake of efficiency. Let me see if I can articulate this better. There has to be a model where people are looking to get things done, and that people are judged on what they're contributing and the merit of their decision making. I don't know how else to explain it, but I want decisions to be made with that in mind, right? Not from the perspective of we're the municipality, we don't have to do anything we don't want to do, and I'm the head of this department, and I'm not doing anything I don't want to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's good for the people. It doesn't matter what's good for society at whole. This is just what I think, and because of that, I'm hoping that mentality shifts, and that people are held accountable for their decisions. I think that's very, very important. Because to your point, and your point, Rachel, in any business, it's all about accountability, right? You do the best you can, and you're held accountable for your actions. And to the extent you're not meeting your requirements, you end up getting, unfortunately, you get moved out, and you have somebody else comes in who looks at the world a little bit differently. So I think that needs to happen.
Oh boy. I think we're so just quickly in terms of the market in 2025. What exactly are you excited? Are you concerned about some of this disruption in terms of some of these policy changes? Like where do you see yourself investing more time and money this year to try and kind of get a hold of that?
Well, what one business that we're trying to get into is basically buy South Tampa lots, right? And build single family homes on a spec basis.
Oh.
I like that idea. I think there's good margin in it. I think, unfortunately, because of the hurricanes, there are sellers where they're collecting insurance money, they're able to take less on their land.
Yep.
And then there's enough supply out there where prices are sort of fixed now, for at least for a little bit. So that's the business I'm interested in, and I'm looking into. In terms of what I'm worried about the supply chain. There was a great article in Bloomberg it's like if these tariffs would have happened with Canada and Mexico, but let's just call it Canada in terms of lumber, like margins for home builders are going to get squeezed. They said something like 6%, some like meaningful percent of their profit that ends up getting squeezed because some 50% of the average house is lumber from Canada, and then it adds these dollars, whatever that equation was, like it's squeezing margins. And so then you worry about, land positions that are potentially residential. But I do think the subset of this, and this article talks about it, the way to invest into this is the build for rent world, right? So build for rent rents are higher than ever. Unaffordability continues to go this way. Mm-hmm. And so if you're able to build product, you're going to get, your rents are only going to go in one direction. And because of the interest rate environment, the multifamily world has been on hold, right? At least for a couple of years. It's not looking better. The only multifamily deals that are getting done at least in the Midwest, are ones that have 100% tax abatements. That's it.
Yeah.
So, if you got a rental business, I think you can probably do pretty decent.
Yeah, the build for rent model is super interesting for all those reasons. Definitely exciting. Well, in terms of contacting you, kind of following along with what you're up to, what's the best way for our audience to keep in touch and to kind of keep track of what you guys are up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in investing in PropTech or interested in the PropTech space or want to subscribe, reach out to me. My info will be in the bottom of the podcast.
Fantastic. We'll definitely include that in the show notes. We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.